In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to use Zremesher to improve the topology of your model in ZBrush. Before starting, it's best practice to decimate your model so that you can get a much quicker and more efficient result. If you go to your sidebar and scroll down until you find the Geometry tab, Zremesher will be located there. We will start by pointing out the most basic and necessary controls in Zremesher. This is a result of just having the target polygon count reduced to 10. As you can see, we are beginning to get some edge loops around the eyes, but only in one particular area, which is not very effective for animation. Next, let's take a look at having just the adapt and adaptive size turned up all the way. The result of adaptive size being turned to 100 will give us this additional influence around areas where pinch is detected. However, this algorithm does ignore the target polygon count. Next, let's take a look at a brush that we can use to help define the topology that we're aiming for more clearly. By typing BZR into your keyboard, you will get access to the Zremesher guide brush. This is essentially defining an area where the algorithm is going to take place the most. So if we create a loop around the eyes, like this, and around the mouth, like this, and then remesh, as you can see, we get a much more defined area of influence where those curves were placed. So if we go back and look at our curves, we can see that they are almost identical to the ones drawn. However, for this example, I will note that I had the curve strength turned all the way to 100. This is going to be telling ZBrush to ignore pretty much everything except for those curves. That's taking 100% priority at that point. If I were to turn this down, it will have less influence, and we'll get a lot less influence from the curves we made. Let's try 25. Here we can see the result of having the curve strength turned down to 25. As you can see, the topology has changed a little bit, but this is the second time remeshing that same model. But we still get those edge loops around the eyes, although they are a little bit smoother than when we set the curve strength to 100. Next, let's take a look at the Use Poly Paint function in Zremesher. Use Poly Paint can be found directly underneath the curve strength slider. Let's turn that on. Now, there are three colors that affect how Zremesher determines the density that is controlling your mesh. The first color is white. By painting your model completely white, you are telling Zremesher that it has complete control of all the loops on the character. This is a result of having a completely white model. However, if I were to go to color, actually let's fill this first. So we're going to fill our object, that way it keeps the white. Then go to B, P, A on our keyboard, we will get access to the paintbrush. With the paintbrush selected, let's go to red. Now you can see that it changed all the other subtools in our scene to that color. Don't worry about that. But what we will do is we're going to just give a quick line of red down the arm here. By painting your model red, this is going to be telling Zremesher to create more edge loops in that area. The other color that will affect Zremesher is blue. We paint some blue here and use Zremesh. And we'll just turn it back to white so we can see a little bit clearer. This is the result we'll get. As you can see, we have a much more spread out topology on the areas that were painted blue compared to the areas that were painted red. And the areas that were left white are pretty evenly spaced. If we were to want to gain more control over the spacing between our edge loops, we can go to the color density slider right here. By saying the color density is 1, it'll essentially double the influence of whatever color is being painted. So for example, if red was the color we're using, it's going to say add 2 times the influence for every edge loop that would have been white. If we were to turn it to 4 though, that would be saying do 4 times the spacing between each edge loop. The same goes in reverse for if we're using blue. Finally, let's take a look at some of the options for freezing the borders and keeping some of the groups for a multi-part object. This would not be particularly helpful for my character here. Instead, we're going to use this on his overalls. So this is their original look with the polyframes turned on. Let's turn those off. So this is what it originally looks like. Now, if I were to go to just change the target polygon count to a reasonable number, let's say 10,000, and do it just plain Jane settings, this is the result we'll get. As you can see, not very good, and the seams completely disappeared. We also lose any features with the buttons, and it just doesn't look good at all. And if we look at the topology is pretty scarce looking. Yes, did get lowered dramatically, but let's take a look at the option if we turned on poly groups. Now this is the result of just freeze groups turned on. So with just freeze groups turned on, we can tell that there is, one, a lot more polygons, actually 300,000 of them. And then when we turn this down, we can see that the seams are they're hanging in there, but it's a little dirty still. So it's not completely fixed. We don't have a retopologize mesh, but it is an improvement. And for something a little bit simpler, I think this could be a good tool. Finally, let's take a look at poly border. Now, poly border has a pretty similar result to freeze groups. The big difference is poly border is targeting more of the pinch areas, whereas poly groups is targeting the different groups.